foremost.
Oh, that's a bit of a surprise. There's normally another bumper in there, can you believe it or not? You're back. Ooh. You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio, the #1 listener supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button and subscribe to the archives, which is actually free, believe it or not. Get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website, a t-shirt, a mug, or anything that you like that they have on offer. Thank you for listening to David Mackey's Shiny Side Out and for joining into tuning. That's a new word. That's the word for today, Becky. Today was brought to you by the word tuning. And
I like tuning. I tune all the time and
all the time.
Away.
I tune maybe as much as I science. We're halfway through show number 706. And Mackey's video seems to have been frozen, but that's also okay. There he is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was frozen out there for
You were frozen. Who knew? We're talking about what is this show, Mackey? The Hypothesis and the Epiphany. This is part 7 in the series. And I know we're up to the role of stress and fear, etc.
Perfect. Go ahead. And sorry, just something which came to light as we were researching this, first time around a few years back. We talked about longevity. We talked about, how people could live longer lives, etc., etc. So I just want to say quickly something to that effect. There have now been reports made in various scientific journals, etc., that where people bandy around the age of 20,000 years as something achievable, right? Seriously, in serious tones, obviously, we're talking about ideal conditions, maybe science a bit more advanced, etc., etc. And if you get hit by a brick in the head, then you'll die. Too bad for you. But these are serious scientists talking seriously about lifespans in the tens of thousands of years. Something Dave and I have always maintained. In fact, one of the key principles, one of the key underlying foundations for the hypothesis, which for all intents and purposes is an explanation of the universe, the world. It's our worldview, right? It's our cosmology, if you will. Longevity is a cornerstone, a corner part of it, because for the longest time, ancient cultures, their myths and legends talk about the gods, or half-gods, or demons, or deities, or supernatural beings of any kind of shape. And one of the distinguishing features of these deities and gods, etc., is their immortality, or extremely long-lived. I mean, if you're a human being that lives 200 years, anybody who lives 1,000 years might as well be immortal, right? Because you wouldn't know. And you can imagine a society that goes along, has a normal lifespan, what we consider normal, of 100 years, and then the same person that was seen by your great-great-great-great-grandfather is coming back in your time and not having aged a day, right? Comes from the sky and greets you, and you see all the pictures or even statues of this particular god, and you look at it, this god hasn't changed in, I don't know, let's call it 500-600 years. As far as you're concerned, this god is immortal. These ancient texts also talk about elixirs of immortality, certain plants, certain tinctures and ointments and drinks that could be consumed by the gods. And some legends talk about very specific immortality elixirs made specifically for you, right? So not like a general panacea, but rather a very specific treatment for your specific needs as an individual. So that's important to understand that, right? And now that we have seen that scientists are talking about this, well, yeah, 20,000 years is reasonable. Yeah. And as soon as you do that, there are two things that happen. One, space travel all of a sudden is no longer a problem, even if, and I'm saying big if, the speed of light is your ultimate speed limit. All of a sudden, space travel is no longer as daunting as it might seem, something that you could achieve in your own lifetime. If you lived 20,000 years, you could visit nearby solar systems in your lifetime several times, no problem at all. Right? Number one. This. Who should get that immortality? Who should be allowed to have it? Because unless we actually are spacefaring with colonies all over the galaxy, whatever, there's a certain limit of population that a planet can take. We have
I'm sure Mackie's still there.
We're made immortal and we don't abilities, right? Yeah. Then all of a sudden, with nobody dying, the population explosion would be catastrophic, obviously, right? So now the question here is this, Dave, and this thought came to me just the other day, and I want you, before we go into the hypothesis, I want you to think about this and give me your take. So scientists are now coming out with, hey, we could live a really long time, right? But they did so on the tail end of SARS-CoV-2. Okay, not before. And SARS-CoV-2 is shown to have had significant effects on male fertility, the virus itself. In severe cases of the virus, there is a significant effect on male fertility. So is this the time then, the designated time to talk about immortality, when we know that there will be a significant reduction in the population due to perceived natural causes? Like in Japan and Western Europe, we're seeing a problem with the population that was brought about from a cultural point of view. People are waiting to have children due to economic factors. They're waiting longer and longer. So the population gets older and older, right? Younger people aren't born anymore. So that's actually, in terms of immortality, that's actually a good thing, right? Whereas, of course, in other cultures like Africa and so forth, there's a bit more... the birth rate is a bit higher, et cetera, et cetera. But what if the entire global population were affected by a falling birth rate? Wouldn't that time lend itself to start talking about immortality or lifespans in the thousands of years? What do you reckon?
Yes, is my answer. It's a quick answer. At the top of your statement, you were mentioning, getting hit with a brick or getting run over or something entirely permanent as far as being unalived. And if you cast your mind back to the stories of werewolves and like Dracula, for instance, then you would know about the stake through the heart and the silver bullet. You think about ending someone's life, I suppose, in those stories came about, and that's a very permanent way of ending someone who could live forever. I think it's an important thing that we already have a thought process for it. I'm entirely sure that we have encountered people that weren't, or maybe human, but weren't human, that did live forever, and that these were the things they used. This is, the stories broke away, that the facts broke away from the story, and this is what we have in our civilization to remember those people and how their lives were ended. I think it is entirely possible that it was real and not just a story.
Mm-hmm.
So the King's List is a huge reminder to me that they were of great age. The Sumerians lines up with their end of their story, lines up with the beginning of the Egyptian King's List. They both have an overlap in the middle, but the Sumerian story goes way further back in time. they're talking now maybe 200,000 to 1,000,000 years old for the human race. We've experienced something, and maybe a prior civilization to what we currently have. Maybe we did. Maybe we really did live that long. Well, you know, Xi and Putin and the, what's it, North Korean leader, Mackie? So
Kim.
So they were talking about, you know, organ transplants. But yes, you're right, Mackie. The mRNA CRISPR program can keep you alive, change you, possibly even unlock immortality. So we'll have to see what happens. Maybe they've already done it.
Look,
not just telomeres.
So first of all, yeah. So first of all, I think absolutely, and it goes back a lot longer, and entities have been around here for a very long time indeed. But again, our civilization has rediscovered this knowledge, if you will, and I think just like with the animal-human hybrids, you know, when we speculated whether or not it had been done, absolutely it has been done. All right. In fact, even to the tune of creating so-called super soldiers, etc. Right. But this is all the amazing age of DNA, and you're right. CRISPR, mRNA, and all these technologies that are popping up, and CRISPR, you know, this is really just an immune cell factory for bacteria that we discovered there, and we found these amazing properties that all of a sudden we can edit living genes. What? I mean, I don't think it can be overstated how momentous a development this is. I don't think you can. I don't think there's enough hyperbole in the world to describe just how game-changing that is. But that brings us to the next piece here in the hypothesis, and what we're covering here, we came across during our research into telomeres. We wanted to know, right? And funnily enough, as you will learn in a second, there is a massive difference in life expectancy in children that come from underprivileged backgrounds if you compare them to children from privileged backgrounds. But look, we'll let the text do the talking. But I just thought that's a tremendous insight into how our biology works. Not surprising, really, if you look at bees and ants and how their colonies function, where the queen lives, well, virtually forever, and their workers, be it ants or bees, their lifespan is extremely limited. And this is all due to diet, funnily enough. But Dave, why don't you get us started?
I so want to take it in different directions, but let's read the text.
Oh, no, take it. No, take the direction first.
All right. So,
no. The text will always be here. Yeah.
The text will always be here. We're at page 17. So, have you ever met someone who looks like they've had a hard life? And you discover they have, and when during your line of inquiry, you ask them, and they reveal to you their age, that surprises you because they look at least a decade or two older than what they've just declared to you. Now, these are just people, regular people, who have just lived hardship, and it can really take the youth away from you. And I think the exposure to hardship and the chemicals your body produces in survival mode during hardship is detrimental to your longevity. And that's the baseline that I'm going to enter into this story with. Telomere time. Why we should treat biological age cautiously. The study, back in May 4th, 2020, the study by Martins et al. Shows that the telomere lengths, or TLS, little s, of newborns and their placentas were associated with the socio-economic status, or SES, of their parents. They argue that this finding could partially explain the well-known association between SES health and longevity. In landmark work nearly 2 decades ago, Epel and et al. Found that the average TL was shorter than expected in individuals as the extent of caregiver stress increased. An association between stress and adversity and average TL of circulating blood or saliva cells has been repeatedly demonstrated in diverse contexts since the work of Epel and their colleagues, and many researchers have construed telomere shortening relative to chronological age as evidence of advanced biological aging, cellular aging, weathering, susceptibility to disease, and even decreased potential lifespan. However, the complexity of this phenomenon is such that the biological mechanism of contextual telomere shortening is still not established, despite 2 decades of research. We can conclude there is a very early, i.e. at birth, association between SES and TL, and this is consistent with the observation that TL shortening, or relative to the overall population, is associated with the later declines in health and well-being. It is not clear what is added by postulating an intervening construct such as biological age to explain these findings. Mekki.
Okay, now, so what that means is that if your parents lived a stressful life, right, the DNA they're passing on to you already has shortened telomeres. Like your telomere chains aren't as long as someone who had, let's say, privileged parents or parents that didn't experience any stress or adverse effects during their life. Think about that for a second. Given enough time, you could create distinct classes of people, of human beings. The long-lived human beings and the short-lived human beings. Always assuming that each group would take care of their health to the best of their ability, right? And if you look at the royals, for example, globally, any royal lineage, you will find that long life is the rule rather than the exception. So ages of 90 plus are not common among royalty. Whereas if you look at, I guess the best word might be peasants, if you look at, families or dynasties of peasants, you will find that the average age is significantly lower than that, right? And what the study found, and this is really what blew my mind, Dave, right? This study found that this is a disadvantage that you're born with. Okay. And yes, you can probably, rise above your station, etc., and make it in the world, and then hopefully have children whose life isn't as stressful, and then maybe you can reverse it. So in your genetic lineage, you might be able to lengthen those telomere strands again. Who knows, right? But it's amazing that this is actually passed on physically as a characteristic to your child, right? I mean,
I've got something to add to that too.
Please, go ahead.
So, do you remember the study they did where they had mice and they showed them blue food which tasted bad? And the blue food that tasted bad was never present ever again, and the children of those mice were separated while they were still, wrinkly bits of pink bits, right? And raised without any cross-contamination of information between the parent and the child through 5 generations, Mekki. the importance of not eating the blue food was passed on. Initially, when they were presented, the parents, the original set, were presented with blue food, they just ate it because it smelled like food, and it was not very good for them. So they passed on that you shouldn't eat it. In their DNA, 5 generations later, I think they got to 9 generations later, who had successfully been separated from their parents. They couldn't have learnt anything, and all the way down to that finite period, they were still aware that the blue food was bad. Now, in humans, they say that you can, this is in psychology, they say that you can have a fear of something you've never encountered. So you could have a parent or grandparents or great-grandparents, for instance, who were frightened by clowns. You've never seen a clown in a book, cartoon, in real life, and yet the moment you see one, you're as scared as you've inherited that fear to be. An irrational fear of spiders or snakes, they're good survival traits. But, you know, as Homer Simpson is known to have suffered from, sock puppet fear. I'm not afraid of anything,
Crazy.
Marge. Sock puppet. Right? So I make a joke about it so you remember it. But we can actually pass down a very limited set of instructions, which are survival-based instructions. And it was proof in those generations of mice, and it's proof in humans. And here's yet another example of it. And that is the ever-reducing stress of lower socio-economic life, which is high stress and shortening your telomere length, which shortens your eventual life unless you can become exposed to telomerase producing sources. So I think it's really extraordinary that we are at this point where we do know what this means, that your telomeres are protecting your code, Mekki. And there's a packet of code
100%.
that can be passed down.
Yeah. It's fascinating. You see, this genetic memory, because that's what it really is. We're calling, it's genetic memory.
Mm-hmm.
It should shed a completely new light on how we think about our genes, right? So evolution or the theory of evolution and genetics has always been about steady state, always. But it seems here that a strong impression upon even an individual of our species could somehow, and I don't think we know how that works yet, right? By the way, but somehow imprints itself upon that person's DNA. Somehow, there's some kind of chemical process, and somehow a fear or something is encoded. And by the way, the experiment with the rats, did they actually fully understand how it was encoded in the rats?
No, they couldn't find it, but because of the evidence
Right.
that they were presented with, they concluded
They couldn't. Yeah.
they couldn't find it, but they concluded that this was the only way that this education could be passed down.
Right. That makes perfect sense, right? I mean, here's the evidence, and if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck,
Sure.
and tastes like a duck after you roast it, it's probably a duck.
And if you can make pate,
And pate, now you're talking, brother. So the conclusion here is that there is a process by which our DNA gets encoded in the same way or in a similar way to CRISPR. So CRISPR changes your DNA, and we know how that works. We actually we understand, and we do it, etc., etc. This is another innately us process, clearly, that somehow manages to do something similar. And not only that, it's a memory that is then passed down through generations. I find genetic memory fascinating. I really do.
If you and I, Mekki, if you and I were writing a program to create a life form, there would be more success in the petri dish for the life form if we could have it remember the good from the bad.
Yeah.
Much
100%.
more. You've got to think about
100%.
what genetic memory is passed down to a turtle
Yeah.
who never sees its parents but knows it has to come back to the same damn beach every year, right?
Exactly.
You hear what I'm saying. So
I'm hearing you.
It does exist. In humans, we don't have very much of it.
Yeah, or at least we think we don't have very much of it.
Well, maybe we don't live long enough
of,
to exhibit it, Mackie.
That is true, 100%. And I think a lot of what we might call innate knowledge is suppressed by the indoctrination we undergo. Our natural impulses are pretty much cut off. I mean, if you look at the more natural peoples of the world, right? People that we like to call primitive, they're much more in tune with a raft of things that are completely closed off to a Western person. Yeah, absolutely. So let's listeners, think on that for a second. But the critical thing here is to understand that it would indicate our genes are tuned to catastrophic change. Okay.
Do you know what it probably does, Mackie? I'm going to say this. If there was a catastrophe, like where people can become superhuman and lift a car off someone that's crushed, right? If there was a catastrophe and we all had to survive, science has also said that there's possibilities of a very rapid change should we need to adapt to something different.
Yeah, I completely, because the thing, the evidence is there for that. Do you know what I mean? It's, and I also think once an organism has reached a fairly stable or optimal physiology, there's no longer a need to change physiologically. And what I mean by that is, so we are the shape that we are today. Taller, shorter, it doesn't matter. It's still the shape of a Homo sapiens type creature. And we see the same thing in crocodiles, my favorite, and sharks. If you go 400 million years back, you will find sharks and crocodiles. Because they reached their optimal physiological construction, if you will, right? And it was no longer necessary to make modifications. I mean, if it had become necessary, then there would be something else today, in my opinion. So I don't think evolution is a slow and steady process at all. I believe in punctuated equilibrium, as we've discussed many times before.
100%.
Where, and you need to understand as well that adaptation is not synonymous with evolution. Adaptation is a bird changing its color, for instance, right? Or even the shape of its beak, right? To be more useful for certain.
If it's an omnivore or insectivorous, yes, I get it.
100%, right? So there are certain adaptations, and they're passed on, and if you have enough adaptations that create enough distance from the original model, then you can talk evolution. Absolutely.
Mackie, what about the genetic differences they found with the wolves around Chernobyl? They've found that they now are able to survive in that environment where it would normally have, they would not have. They've been able to survive and get used to and thrive in an environment that would kill them.
You see, for this, and you're 100% correct, and that brings to mind, of course, a whole other branch of biology, which is called the extremophile. So for the longest time, we thought there are certain environments where nothing can exist. And Dave made a great example here. And these are complex organisms, mammals, wolves, dogs, that live in a completely irradiated zone. Like, they should not. They should die from radiation poisoning. That's what should happen, right? Clearly, though, something happened in their DNA on there that allowed them to survive and potentially even thrive in that environment, whatever that might have been, right? And these extremophile studies have shown us that creatures, and they're living biological entities, can exist in environments we thought were completely devoid of life. The bottom of the ocean, near oceanic vents, the volcanic vents that come up and are full of all kinds of toxic chemicals. Creatures live there. The tardigrade, My favorite animal
I love it.
of all time. More so than the coelacanth, and Dave knows what that means, right? I love the tardigrade. Why do I love the tardigrade? Because the tardigrade is virtually indestructible. It can survive space, the vacuum of space. What? I mean, if you're looking to, colonize space, to go out into the world, etc., do what you can in the cosmos, look at the biology of the extremophiles here on Earth. Look at the genes that make it possible for them to thrive in those environments, right? And this is not even a very clever prediction that I'm making here now, but there will come a point when we will splice tardigrade and extremophile genes into our own to make us survive certain harsh environments. I guess in a similar fashion to what you saw in Blade Runner. The what were they called? The artificial
simulants.
The humans. Simulants, thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. So the simulants, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, human. I mean, made humans, but with such astounding properties that they can survive the harsh outer space and other hostile planetary environments, etc., etc. I would not be surprised at all if we did that at some point. It is really quite something else if you think about it. I mean, really think about what we can achieve in the future. Thanks for letting me study, Dave. This is fascinating stuff. Extremophiles. Now, again, one of the hypotheses, further pillars, is the age of humanity or human-like civilizations. Right. So rather than individual immortality, which I think we have now proven to be a possibility at the very least, right? And when I say we, I'm talking about the scientific studies that have been undertaken. I think we can all agree that it is certainly possible for human beings to live a lot longer than we thought. So I think we can park that for a second. But how old, Dave, is humanity at large? How long have we been around as Homo sapiens? The accepted wisdom when I was... Yeah?
I remember it being about 100,000 years initially, and then it's kind of stretched out to 250 because of the Anunnaki. That's when they were meant to have been here. But it's possible it goes back further.
Yeah, and you're correct. When I was in high school, many years ago, before the flood, no, when I was in high school, the age was about 100,000. It was a nice round number. Homo sapiens, us.
And it's
was
because
about 100,000
because that date was slotted in because that was after the Neanderthal bones dated.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's why we were dated to that point.
Correct. Now, in the intervening years, we have learned a great deal, and what we've learned is that the way we are today, our shape, our possible capacity and capability is at least 300,000 years old. So 200,000 years further into the past than initially thought. We also learned, and again, when I was a child, it was accepted that Neanderthal was our ancestor, and as Dave just mentioned, that's why we were dated to where we were, right? Because clearly Neanderthal is an ancestor. Not true. Neanderthal was coexistent to us, or with us rather, for at least 200,000 years. At least 200,000 years we coexisted, right? Now, that's a long time. And not only did we coexist, we interbred, which means they were not a different thing. They were Homo sapiens just as much as we were. And we also know they were more closely related to us than horses are to donkeys, because clearly the offspring that was produced was fertile. Whereas if you crossbreed a donkey and a horse, you get a mule, which is completely unable to reproduce.
I want to make this point, Mickey. I know that discos or bars didn't exist back then, but you could eat some rotting fruit and have enough alcohol, Mickey. In the Anatole, it could just light your wick, if you know what I'm saying.
I hear what you're saying, but see, this is funny, right? So, for think our ancestors looked like. I mean, there's this stereotypical image of a troglodyte, a cave dweller, etc. Heavy brows and beards, and more brutish and gorilla-looking than human-looking. Not true. So the funny thing is this. So Homo sapiens, of course, we are what we are. But you look at the different types of Homo sapiens, from Australian indigenous people to Asians to Europeans to Africans, all quite different, with very different facial features and skull features and even skeletal and muscular features. Quite different, right? Now imagine a world with that factor of difference or differentiation increased by a factor of 100. Because now you've got Denisovan man in there, you got Neanderthal in there, you got Homo florensis in there, and a couple others we don't even know the names of.
Oh, Mackie,
right?
I'm showing some pictures of Chaka from Land of the Lost.
Nice, good man. So this is really, you have to understand that, 40,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, the variety of human beings, right, of what we would call a human being, was so much greater than what we have today. And today, I mean, we have a lot of variety. I mean, if you take all of the races that we have, all of the different colors and whatever, all the different peoples, and you will have hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of different, very specific faces, right? But again, just imagine that increasing by a factor of 1,000 if you go back in time, and all of a sudden stories of hobbits and gnomes and trolls and whatever aren't as fantastic as you might think.
It's not far-fetched anymore. That's right. So if you were to have, let's say a tall a basketballer against the shortest, maybe, I don't know, someone maybe from Indonesia or something like that, have an African, someone from Northern European looking, you've got Italian and Greek. Everyone looks just a little different. It doesn't matter where they are today. I know I've travelled. I know, Mackie, you've travelled, and for those who have also travelled and seen this, from let's call it the rootstock of the civilization, and not the eventual interbreeding that we're seeing now within our own cultures. And that's fine. It's all good. Everything's good, and I have no complaints about anything. Just that it appears to be evident that we do have different ancestral backgrounds, and while we all are Homo sapiens, that the Floriensis was meant to be quite short.
Yes.
Yep. And I would really like, if we could ever discover anything, I would love it to be the true origin of Homo sapiens sapiens. I would love to see that, because I know that when you do DNA tests, it'll say, oh, you've got, this much percentage of not the existing continents and the cultures we have, but whichever of the ancient haplogroups that are found. It could be Florensis, it could be the others you mentioned, because I can't remember all the names of them. I need to see it in front of me to be able to remember them. But it really throws out the out of Africa design of the evolution of Homo sapiens sapiens, where you see the true origins from face to face, and the head shapes. Everything is completely different to what they're calling it to be.
And you see, I completely agree. If you look at the I think it's the Paracas. Is it a Paracas skull?
Yeah, Paracas skulls. Yeah,
in South America. So, but I completely agree. See, the thing is this: we rest the out of Africa theory pretty much on the work of the Leakeys, Lucy,
that's the jawbone.
Hominids. Yeah, and there has been evidence, and we talked about this at length, and I think we'll talk about it again as we go through the text, which we'll probably never finish, where things have been found in strata geological strata
Mm-hmm.
that are millions of years old, in some cases hundreds of millions of years old, that shouldn't be there, including, and this is the kicker here, including human remains
That's right.
and footprints. And again, we spoke about this in the past, but there's this track of footprints in a what used to be, I guess, a riverbank. It's crisscrossing dinosaur tracks, and apparently the dinosaur tracks aren't quite right because it shows tracks of dinosaurs that are thought not to have coexisted, at least as far as we know from the geological record, etc. But clearly they must have, because they're crisscrossing each other, even stepping onto each other's footprints. Now, that in itself is quite a statement. The bigger statement here is that this appeared to be human footprints, or what look like human footprints, also crisscrossing the dinosaur tracks, both stepping on them and being stepped on. So,
and they presume one of those was a female and one was a child.
Yeah.
And they go in one direction, Mekhi, and on the way back, the woman must be carrying the child because there's no footprints.
Yeah. Look,
or the child was eaten. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, one or the other. But the kicker here is that these are obviously, I mean, if it's a dinosaur footprint, then they're hundreds of millions of, or at least tens of millions at least years old, well beyond the age we ascribe to anatomically modern human beings. In fact, well beyond the age we ascribe to any of our ancestors. Even in the furthest reaches of the past, like Homo erectus or Homo habilis or Homo gigantopithecus. None of those were meant to have existed at the time of the dinosaurs. So I'm not a creationist. I'm not, right? So I'm not going to make a creationist argument here. What I am saying is that the human race or a human presence, right, goes back a very long time indeed. And we do have these artifacts that were found in mines, right, during the Industrial Revolution, when we were hungry for coal and iron and copper. And in the 19th century, that's when we really started to dig stuff up because we needed it, especially coal, right? And then later oil, but oil was a completely different process. Oil we pumped up. For coal, we had to dig. Mm-hmm. And I do know a bit about mining because I've supported our mining customers for the company I work. So I have actually been, anyway, to mine sites. But the point is, in the olden days, in the 19th century and before, people would dig into the earth by hand or with dynamite, but they would dig tunnels, and they would dig, and a lot of the digging was done by hand with shovel and pickaxe and so forth. And it lent itself to discovery because you're not destroying things en masse. You don't have these massive explosions, right? But you have explosions, but they're more limited. But you do find things, especially if you dig with your hand. Now that practice is almost completely gone, and now they have automated diggers, right?
With just a grinding head.
Correct. And yeah, so it's almost half processed by the time you transport it to the surface. But there are very few people now that still dig with a shovel and a pickaxe. And in some instances, like especially open cut mines, there are these massive explosions that get rid of a layer of rock, etc., which is then processed, made even smaller. And any find that you have would be the dumbest of luck. You just don't make those finds because it is no longer the way we dig the earth. It just isn't, right? And I want to say here something. The Skinwalker Ranch, and it fits. The Skinwalker Ranch in the mesa that dominates the back half of the ranch, they found something embedded in the sandstone 400 feet, 300 to 400 feet into the sandstone. 300 to 400 feet, we're talking 150, right? 100 to 150 meters into the rock. And they have extracted from it metal, right? And they've extracted from it ceramics. And both the metal and ceramics look like they have been manufactured with very specific properties, and the properties and the alloy, if you will, the composition of the metals within those finds or the chemicals in general for the ceramic-like substance as well, is similar to that what you would find in ablative armor on a space shuttle for re-entry, for instance. And the latest find on that range was this ceramic material, like I said, which seems to be, I'm not saying it is, but it seems to be a superconductor at room temperature. Let that sink in for a second. It also shows magnetic properties. And it seems to absorb heat at an astounding rate, or temperature changes for that matter. So that's what they found. Now, clearly, that mesa has been around for a long time, and unless you have got a technology that can beam something into something without it causing some kind of rupturing event where two atoms try to occupy the same space, which leads to, well, worst case scenario, formation of a black hole. You can't explain it. So whatever is in that mesa must have been there a very long time indeed, right? And this is when we're talking about the Earth and the age of the Earth and the age of humanity. We've been taught a certain thing. We have been told a story. Is this story true? The truth is, we don't know. There are certain things we know. There are certain things we don't know. All the evidence that speaks to another story that we have been around for much longer has been suppressed, but we'll get to that in the text. It has been suppressed. It has been dismissed. It has been buried. The physical evidence has been lost. Dave, it's been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And we are left with, what the official story is. If you talk to an Indian person, right, especially someone who's familiar with the Vedas, they'll tell you, no, we've been around for millions of years. This is not an amazing revelation to many Indian people. It is not. It's not an amazing revelation because their texts, their cultural and religious texts teach them, no, we've been around for millions of years. What are you talking about? Right? It says so right here. It's not an amazing revelation. That's why Eric von Däniken is so popular in India, right? And it's just a different worldview. It's a competing worldview with the West, completely at odds with the West. But let me just sorry, I know I digressed. So look, we talked about it when we were young, 100,000 years. So scientifically accepted, right? Today, the age of humanity is 300,000 years, right? Now, the article here is called, When Did We Become Fully Human? What Fossils and DNA Tell Us About the Evolution of Modern Intelligence, September 9, 2020, by Nicholas R. Longridge. He's a senior lecturer in evolutionary biology and paleontology at the University of Bath. Bones of primitive Homo sapiens first appear 300,000 years ago in Africa, with brains as large or larger than ours. They're followed by anatomically modern Homo sapiens at least 200,000 years ago, and brain shape became essentially modern by at least 100,000 years ago. At this point, humans had brain cases similar in size and shape to ours. Assuming the brain was as modern as the box that held it, our African ancestors theoretically could have discovered relativity, built space telescopes, written novels, and love songs. Their bones say they were just as human as we are. Because the fossil record is so patchy, fossils provide only minimum dates. Human DNA suggests even earlier origins for modernity. Let me say this again. Human DNA suggests even earlier origins for modernity. Comparing genetic differences between DNA and modern people and ancient Africans, it's estimated that our ancestors lived 260,000 to 350,000 years ago. All living humans descend from those people, suggesting that we inherited the fundamental commonalities of our species, our humanity, from them. This is from Nicholas R. Longridge, senior lecturer in evolutionary biology and paleontology at the University of Bath, as I said. And Dave, maybe we make this part of our video. This link is really important. I'll send it to you in Discord because I can do that now because I'm very clever. Maybe I can't. No, I can. Here we go. So what we see here is the date of humanity is pushed further and further back, right? And I predict here. It's not a great prediction again. This is not genius level predictions. I predict that there will be even further adjustments made. Okay, that's what I think. I really believe that we will push it. How come this doesn't work?
If you just... Oh, okay. It's all good.
Yeah. No, I tried... I don't know if it came there or not, but I tried to paste it. It's not going in there.
That's right.
Anyway, but we will go further and further back in time. And I think we will dig up some of the...
I'm hoping we'll dig up something too. Meckie's frozen. His poor machine. With 4 minutes to go and all.
Evidence
there
that we found further, but... Yeah. So the next time we'll talk about the actual article upon which the previous article is based on, by Karina M. Schlebusch. And this is South African Ancient Genomes Estimate Modern Human Divergence to 350,000 to 260,000 years ago. It is fascinating when you look at the timeline there, right? If let's call it 300,000 years for argument's sake. Our civilization, let's call it 15,000 years since the Younger Dryas, right? Since the catastrophic end of the Ice Age.
Yep.
Right? About that.
The hourglass.
If that is true
of our civilization, yep.
Yeah, let's call it that. So let's call it 15,000 years, and then we got 300,000 years. That means we could have developed a civilization like ours, theoretically, 20 times. 20 times. Okay? So if it took us to go from 0 to where we are today, if it took us 15,000 years, and I'm going to say here, it should have taken us significantly less time, but whatever, so 15,000 years. In the 300,000 years that we are as much or pretty much the way we are today, we could have built civilizations 20 times over that are at least equivalent to what we have today. That should give you some food for thought.
100%. And I'm going to bring you some evidence to see for the next show, next weekend, of how long what we've built will last. I'll bring you a timeline for that, because that'll make sense to you then why we can't see anything.
Yes.
That it'll make entirely sense. Mecky, I want to just take a second to thank everyone on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Rumble for watching our material, because we've got 34,000 in the last month alone just on TikTok. I know we're up in the 27K for YouTube. I'd like everyone, if they can, to help support us, because we do this for free. How many things can you say you do for free for others in your life? That I think it's important. So if you could help us, you can donate to us directly. You can donate to the station as well. We don't get that money. We don't get what you do there. That's just for the station. We're trying to make something of this. We'd really like to be able to get our message out further. And I have a dream, Mecky. It's been said before, but I have a dream. And that is for us to be able to have a team and be able to put together a documentary series on all of this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. I know a lot of it's been done, but we would love, Dave and I would love to go to those places and bring the information to you guys. Really would love to do that, because there's a lot of stuff out there, especially in Australia and the Pacific, that hasn't really been investigated yet. And more stuff is coming to light every day. Look at what LiDAR has done to the sciences. I mean, LiDAR has been revolutionary when it comes to archaeology.
Right? I've got some friends in that tech, Mecky, but you know what? what do we ask that everyone does?
Be safe.
Absolutely, 100%. We'll see you next week. We'll see you at 7 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, US time, for Plato's Cave. And back here again next week for a Shiny Side Out with David Mackey. Take care, everyone.